I'd like to talk about your highlights in the 5 years, your own personal highlights, and maybe things that weren't so good. I don't know, whatever you fancy. Things that stand out.
It's very difficult to pick out the highlights. There's so much that, I mean, there's three aspects of the island that we enjoy. It's the community here, which is if I talk about strong community spirit, that's become a cliche. But the people do look after each other here on the island. People do have a sense that the islanders need to look over their shoulder at people who need a bit of help. And the way you see that most of all, I think, is the extent to which people join in as volunteers, with charities, after-hours school events, sporting events at the weekend, music events. It's all volunteers here, and that is a reflection of the way. It seems almost as if very many people in the Isle of Man expect to give up a couple of evenings a week and a part of the weekend in order to do that, and that creates a very good atmosphere. And I think that, combined with the sense of a community at ease with itself, comfortable in its own skin, choose whatever phrase you like, means that it's part of the reason why they welcome outsiders, people like us who parachute in for 5 years, as well as they do. And we've been enormously welcomed here in the Isle of Man. Certainly we're in a special position, I realise that. But the Isle of Man is welcoming, and I think that is made easier by the fact that there's a quiet self-confidence about the Isle of Man. So that leads to all sorts of activities that we've joined. I mean, the music and the drama here is exceptional. I never thought you could do Last Night of the Proms solely with a brass band, because there are very big bouncy bits of the Last Night of the Proms concert, and that's ideally suited to a brass band. But there's some very quiet, subtle bits as well, and there it is. They do it. And that's the quality of the music here. And the musicals, some of the musicals are certainly West End standard, and they're all amateurs.
What about the royalty side of things? I mean, you've hosted quite a few.
There's 3 royal visits I think we've had. We had Prince William here for the TT one day. He doesn't hide his enthusiasm for motorbikes. He doesn't admit whether or not he still rides one, but he did years ago, and that was great fun, and people liked that. And he's very, very good with the crowds. He's got a natural style there, as he was with the bikers. So that was good. And then nearly 2 years ago, I thought, we haven't had a royal visit for a bit, and conscious there hadn't been a Royal Tynwald, and we asked the Princess Royal if she'd come over for a day, and we got her to do 3 things, 2 from the private sector, 1 from the public sector, which she did with gusto, even though it poured with rain from the moment she stepped off the plane to the moment she got back on it. But she came fully prepared for that, and so that was nice. And she did 1 thing in Douglas, 1 in Ramsey, and 1 over in Peel, open things. But we also used that to introduce her to wider groups of people, which was nice. And then most recently, on the 5th of July this year, 2021, she was here for the Royal Tynwald, to create a Royal Tynwald.
Did you push for that one? I mean,
yes.
It's not,
well,
we want royalty, you're bowing out.
No, not bowing out. The President of Tynwald and it's his day. But obviously approaches to any of the members of the royal family come through the Lieutenant Governor of the day. So yes, we did press for that. It had been 13 years, I think, since there was a last Royal Tynwald.
So you've got them on speed dial, have you? How's it work? You've got contacts.
Some things have to be left a little vague,
okay.
Paul. Yeah. But no, there's the system, and her officer make a point of letting counties around England and Wales, Scotland, and Crown dependencies know well in advance when she might be free to do things. They've got a very organised system. So there we were, and she came and she's extremely good. Well, they're all good when they're doing these things, because she wants to just keep going. So she did Tynwald, the full ceremony in the morning, and then after a sandwich somewhere, she went back and wandered around the fair behind the hill, which was good, and saw all sorts of things there. Then we took her down to the Viking camp, which was extremely good. And she knows about Vikings, because when someone's been doing these things, these sort of things for as long as she's seen this sort of thing before, and she asked very intelligent questions about what they were cooking and how they used all the skins and making up the tents and the bedding and what have you there. And she went on to see the new Peel lifeboat, because that had been in almost 2 years earlier, 18 months earlier, but because the training crew hadn't been able to come across during lockdowns and then the restrictions on the border, it had only just come back. So she went to look at that and they gave some long service medals. And I said, well, she might want to rest after. No, on we go. And so we took her to Balavartin, which was interesting because she opened that about 7 years ago, but it was before the carriage riding for the disabled started using it. And that's another charity of which she's patron across the British Isles. And they were doing something that afternoon, so we set that up, or they arranged it, so she'd see that. And then she did stood here and took the salute, so to speak, at the beating retreat in the evening. And it was a full day, and it was very good. And I think people did appreciate it. The newspapers covered it well, social media, and it was just a reminder that even at that time of year when the royal family are at their busiest, early July, someone was prepared to carve out a day to come here.
And for you, Tynwald, is it a big thing?
Yes, it is a big thing, because in the absence of a member of the royal family, it is the Queen's representative, as you'd expect, who stands in for them. And so I did that 5 times, including in last year, 2020, when it was a rather subdued.
Oh yes, we had no tent and all that stuff.
No stands. And
no stands.
No people lining the route and the rest of it, but it needed to be done. The laws of the previous 12 months needed to be summarised in both languages by the Deemsters, otherwise they lapse, at least that's what I'm always told, and to go back into the chapel, which converts itself into Tynwald Court, St John's Chapel, to what they call caption them, which is sign them off finally and irrevocably as laws of the Isle of Man. Anyway, so did that for 5 years, and by some miracle it didn't rain on any of those years, because it can be Tynwald Day can be very wet. Anyway, we got away with that. Nor the 6th year, this year, when the Princess Royal was
we had the opposite.
presiding.
The Chief Minister was burning his head.
The Chief Minister was burning his head.
Oh yes, he was outside.
We've had some very wet evenings the evening before for beating retreat here.
Yeah.
I think the first was the Band of the Royal Artillery, and it was so wet they didn't get out of the house. It was just, and we sent a luckless cadet out there to lower the flag at the key moment, but that was as far as we got. And then the Royal Air Force Band were here the following year, and that was pretty damp too. But anyway, we've managed something in each of those years. And it's yes, Tynwald Day is important.
So
and the Princess Royal said as she left, she said she could see, I know it's not meant to quote the royals, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind on this one, she could see, again, she'd been reminded, because it's not the first time she'd done it, but she'd been reminded that this Tynwald Day mattered to a lot of people on the island. It was an important symbol of the autonomy, the separateness, the different culture of the island, and that's why she was ready to come, so that's good.
What are you going to miss the most?
I'm going to miss the people. We're both going to miss this sense of community and people's friendliness here. Very low key, quite in a sense. Nobody sort of bowls up to you in the street if they recognise you and say, "Can we have your autograph?" or anything silly like that. But this sort of an odd nod here or hello there, because after 5 years, people have seen my mugshot in the papers often enough, so they will recognise me. But this sort of warm atmosphere. The scenery is tremendous here. That's what I'd hoped for. I'd spent time as a young man in different parts of what I call the Western British Isles, anywhere from Cornwall through West Wales, Western Ireland, a lot of time in Western Scotland when I could. But I'd never lived in any of those, and I wanted to do that. And I'm not disappointed to be able to stand out beyond around that Erie Cushion area on the west coast, and you're quite high up, and you look either north up past Niarbyl or past Peel, though you don't see Peel, or south right down to the Calf, and you can't see any sign of human habitation. I mean, that is something you don't get in many places short of Western Scotland, that sense of wildness. And I know there's a bit of an issue at the moment about how well the footpaths are being kept, but on the whole, the footpaths, the Radnor Follin and the other footpaths are well enough maintained for us to have got out most weekends for a couple of hours. And the third element is the amount of activity, the things you can do. I've talked a bit about music and concerts and the drama, but there is always so much to do. I mean, poor Mike Wade of the newspaper could fill his supplement 2 or 3 times over every week from the things that are on. Almost all of them amateurs, done by volunteers. We were at the Gaiety probably for the last time the other day, and yet again, the musical was very strong indeed. This was the chorus line that was being put on, and never disappointed. So those 3 things: a lovely community, great scenery, and plenty of activity, plenty of things to go and see, watch, or take part in.
You use the we a lot there. Your wife's been very important to this, hasn't she?
Yes. Now, I think people like to see spouse of the Lieutenant Governor. So far it's always been a man, but it could be the wife, it could be the husband of a woman doing it. Probably will be one day. They like to see them. Diana doesn't feel that and I don't feel that she needs to turn out for everything. Some things I do on my own, other things we do together. But she's always here when we entertain, and so when receptions or dinners or events in the garden, it's the two of us doing it. We even did an investiture the other day in the garden. Oh. It was one of that very hot spell in late July, and had serried rows of seats out there for the. What we do there is when someone is awarded by the Queen the BEM, that investiture is always done here, and it's up to them. They can name 50 people or so to come and watch. And I did preface that by saying I wasn't quite sure it was legal, because there are rules about when you. But I wasn't. I'm sure Her Majesty would understand in the circumstances. So that's the only one I think we have investiture, which is a formal. There's a formal part to that before the bar opens. That we've actually done in the garden. But yes, I think people like to see a spouse taking part in a good deal of it, and especially being the hostess here. And that's what we've done, and Diana's enjoyed that. But she's had time to do her own things here as well. She's a keen golfer, tennis player.
Have you made friends for life anywhere here, do you think?
Yes, there are people. Yeah, no, there are people here we will keep in touch with, certainly for a long, as long as they and we are still around.
Okay. We've got to wrap this up soon. We're running out of time. What is next for you then?
Well, I will retire.
You won't
properly.
You won't just retire.
I thought I'd retired 9 years ago when I stopped being a diplomat. And
you won't just sit at home reading the Times, will you? I'm sure.
No. Well, the first thing is that our local area. I'm already involved in one tiny charity there, and there'll probably be others. And it's a great area for wildlife. The equivalent in Norfolk of what is the Manx Wildlife Trust here, which is just called the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, is very active. It was the first ever wildlife trust in the British Isles, and they're proud of that. And they've got a lot of reserves and a lot of areas which. And before I came here, I used to spend every Sunday in one of those helping the younger bird watchers identify these rather difficult to distinguish waders strutting around in the pools, and so I'll go back and do something like that.
Any
as well.
part-time charity work as well?
Yes, well, that is
charity,
really
yes,
that
charity,
is.
yes. But anything to keep you getting out of bed in the morning besides the golf and anything else?
We've got a garden that has been woefully neglected, and that will take several years to pull that into shape. But we'll keep a small base in London as well, which we have, and so that when we want to go down to see people there or go to events and things in London, that's an easy thing.
How are you going to feel on the last day?
Very sad indeed, and because if I say I'm in denial about leaving, that sounds silly at this close to the time. But we have been in that denial, because after 5 years, I suppose about half of what we do, it comes up every year. Another part of it comes up every couple of years, and then a lot of other things are one-offs each time. But you get into the rhythm, and you know what's coming, and you know what to expect. You know the things that are the highlights, and you know the ones where people are going to be really appreciative, and everybody is. And there's never a late night here. The only really late night I've had in the Isle of Man, when I didn't get to bed till 2 o'clock, was on the Calf of Man, going to watch the Manx shearwaters. Note to say watch, you don't watch them at all, you hear them, because they only come in when it's absolutely dark. You can't see anything. They've got a thermal imaging camera there, the thermal imager that picks them up, and you hear them. And then you shine a spotlight when they come down to the ground to go to their burrows to feed their young, which they say they only do in the middle of the night. And then they use huge butterfly nets to catch them and ring them. Anyway, that was the latest night I've had, and the only time I think really, when one's been out much past midnight.
Okay. Finally, will you ever return, do you think?
Oh yes, I'd like to. The convention, which is a good one, is to leave one's successor unencumbered by visits from the immediate predecessor for a while, so we'll leave that. But in 2, 3, 4 years' time, whatever, we'd love to come back and see people here, and we'll hole up quietly in some corner and see the people who still remember us, and go on some of the walks, and I'm sure the footpaths will still be new. And the nice thing about the footpaths here, they're not over signposted. They're kept, and then in some parts of even the British Isles, there'd be umpteen notices saying beware steep slope, or beware big major drop at cliff. You get the statement of the blindingly obvious, and the Isle of Man manages to avoid that, which adds to the charm of the place.